The ocean looks calm from the surface. Waves move gently, the horizon seems peaceful, and everything feels quiet. But the truth is, the ocean hides things we cannot imagine. Things that have swallowed ships, things that have hunted humans, and things that appeared suddenly, leaving behind nothing but fear. Tonight, I'm going to share 3 of the most dangerous and terrifying ocean horror stories. These stories are based on real incidents reported by sailors and divers. Some people survived to tell what happened, and some never came back. Before we begin, if you enjoy dark and mysterious stories like this one, make sure you subscribe to the Midnight Masquerade channel, because every week we bring you the most disturbing and chilling stories from around the world. Now turn off the lights, sit back, and listen carefully, because the ocean remembers everything.
September 5th, 2012. A professional diving team arrived at an offshore oil platform in the North Sea, about 200 kilometers away from the coast. The job seemed routine. 3 saturation divers were assigned to inspect underwater pipes at a depth of around 90 meters. The divers were experienced. They had done this kind of work hundreds of times before. The sea that day was strangely calm. No storm, no warning. At 8:40 a.m., the diving bell slowly descended into the dark water. Inside were 2 divers, while a 3rd diver stayed ready as backup. For the first 20 minutes, everything was normal. The divers reported clear visibility and stable conditions. But at 9:07 a.m., something strange happened. One diver suddenly said on the radio, "Wait, something just moved below us." The control room thought it was probably a large fish, but seconds later, the 2nd diver whispered something that made everyone in the control room freeze. "It's not a fish. It's huge." Then the communication went silent for a moment. The cameras attached to the diving bell only showed darkness. Then, suddenly, a massive shadow passed directly under them. The diver, breathing heavily, said, "It's circling us." The control room ordered them to return immediately, but before the bell could start ascending, the entire structure shook violently. One diver screamed, the camera feed began shaking wildly, and then something slammed into the bell, hard. For a moment, the video showed only bubbles and darkness. The divers started panicking. "Something hit us! Pull us up! Pull us up now!" The crew above began emergency retrieval, but then the cable tension suddenly dropped. The bell had tilted sideways. One diver tried to swim out to fix the line. That was the last time anyone saw him. The camera captured a brief movement in the darkness, something large moving extremely fast. Then the diver disappeared from the screen. The 2nd diver screamed his name over the radio. No response. The rescue team finally managed to bring the bell back to the surface. Inside, one diver was shaking uncontrollably. The other diver was gone. No body was ever found. No official explanation was given. Some said it was a massive shark. Some experts later believed it might have been a giant squid. But the surviving diver said something very different in his official report. He said, "Whatever hit us was bigger than anything I've ever seen in the ocean." To this day, no one truly knows what was waiting in the darkness beneath them. And that was only the first story. The ocean is deeper, darker, and far more dangerous than we think. In the next story, we will talk about a group of sailors who encountered something in the Pacific Ocean that followed their boat for hours in complete darkness. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe to the Midnight Masquerade channel, because the next story might be even more disturbing than this one. And remember, some things in the ocean are never meant to be seen.
July 18th, 2014. A small fishing crew left the harbor in Kodiak, Alaska, early in the morning. Their boat, Silver Wave, had 4 crew members on board. The captain, Mark Lewis, had been fishing in the Pacific Ocean for almost 20 years. Storms, huge waves, mechanical failures, he had seen almost everything the ocean could throw at him. But what happened that night was something none of them were prepared for. By evening, the weather had started changing. The sky turned gray, and a thick fog slowly began spreading across the water. Visibility dropped to less than 100 meters. Still, nothing seemed too unusual. At 9:15 p.m., the crew was preparing to pull in their final fishing net before heading back. One of the crew members, Daniel, suddenly pointed toward the water. "Captain, something's moving out there." At first, Mark thought it was just a group of dolphins. But when he looked carefully, he noticed something strange. There was a dark shape moving under the surface, keeping the exact same speed as the boat. For the next few minutes, the crew watched in silence. The shape stayed there, just beneath the water. Not attacking, not leaving, just following them. At 9:32 p.m., Daniel turned on the large floodlight mounted on the back of the boat. Something huge brushed against the hull. The entire boat shook violently. One crew member almost fell overboard. "Start the engine, now!" the captain shouted. The boat accelerated, but the thing in the water kept up. For the next 2 hours, the crew reported something swimming beside them. Sometimes they could hear deep splashing sounds. Sometimes the boat would shake like something had hit it from below. Then, suddenly, at 11:41 p.m., everything stopped. The water became completely calm. The shape disappeared. No splash, no sound, just silence. The crew reached the harbor around 2 a.m. When they later inspected the boat, they found long scratches along the metal hull, as if something enormous had scraped against it. To this day, none of the crew members agree on what they saw. Some believe it was an unusually large shark. Others think it may have been a giant squid. But Captain Mark Lewis said something strange in his final interview. He said, "I've seen whales, sharks, and squid my whole life, but whatever followed us that night moved in a way I've never seen before." October 31st, 2019. A private research team launched a deep-sea expedition in the Atlantic Ocean about 300 miles from the coast of Florida. Their mission was simple. They wanted to capture rare footage of deep-sea creatures living below 1,000 meters. The team used a small submersible vehicle designed to hold 2 researchers. At 6:10 p.m., the submersible began its descent. Inside were marine biologist Dr. Alan Pierce and engineer Sofia Ramirez. The water slowly turned darker as they descended deeper and deeper. At 400 meters, sunlight completely disappeared. Everything outside the window was pitch black. Only the submersible's lights illuminated the water.
At 980 meters, they reached the planned observation point. For the next 40 minutes, everything was normal. They recorded several strange deep-sea fish. Then, at 7:03 p.m., Sophia noticed something unusual on the sonar. A large, moving object. At first, they assumed it was a whale, but whales rarely dive that deep. The sonar signal kept getting closer, slowly, very slowly. Dr. Pierce turned the external lights toward the direction of the signal. For a few seconds, nothing appeared. Then, suddenly, something moved just beyond the edge of the light. A massive shadow. The researchers froze. Whatever it was huge, much larger than the submersible itself. The shadow slowly circled them. Then their radio connection with the surface ship began breaking. Static filled the communication line. "Control, do you copy?" Sophia said. No response. Then the submersible suddenly jerked violently. Something had hit it. Not hard enough to destroy it, but strong enough to shake the entire vehicle. The lights flickered. For a brief moment, the camera captured something outside the window. A long, dark shape moving quickly past them. Then the sonar signal disappeared, just like that. The rest of the dive was canceled. The submersible immediately began ascending. They reached the surface at 7:46 p.m. Both researchers were shaken. Later, when the footage was reviewed, the team noticed something disturbing. For less than 2 seconds, the camera had captured a strange silhouette, a massive body with long moving appendages. But the image was too dark to identify. No official explanation was ever given. Dr. Pierce later said during a documentary interview, "The deep ocean is the least explored place on Earth. We have mapped more of the moon than the bottom of our own ocean." Then he added something that made many people uncomfortable. "There are things down there we simply don't understand yet." And those were the 3 most disturbing and dangerous ocean horror stories. The ocean covers more than 70% of our planet, yet most of it remains unexplored, which means whatever lives in the deep waters might still be out there. If you enjoy stories like these, make sure you subscribe to the Midnight Masquerade channel, because the next story might be even darker and far more terrifying. Until next time, stay curious, and remember, the ocean is never as empty as it looks.